I have the wrong calendar. Good afternoon. Welcome to the House Environment Committee. We are back considering an amendment to S-325 from Representative Dobrovich.
So I listened to what you all had to say yesterday. I actually thought what I had presented about the sentence with the last sentence being added about the municipality having that last say, and I listened to what you guys said, and it really resonated with me, the concerns around it. And I thought that it would make sense to pull that out and change the date back to 2030 like it was, because I heard the concerns about the date, and just present what came out of the Senate back to you. And to say that the Senate did do work around vetting this amendment and it passed on their floor. And I'd like to just, I hope that you would reconsider it as it was out of the Senate. And that's all I really wanted to do today, was to hear your concerns about, I heard your concerns about the municipality, I heard your concerns about the date and your other concerns with it. But those are the two things that I knew I could change that made it more complex than it was when you got it from the Senate.
Okay. Thank you for that. Do members have questions? Yeah. Seeing any. Representative Tagliavia.
I believe a question came up was the number of municipalities that may or may not find this advantageous. There was a question about them. Do you have any
From talking,
numbers?
I don't. From talking to a few other House members, there were some that told me of probably about 10 or 12 that would take advantage of it. I didn't hear any, but that this would be advantageous for. I didn't hear any say that it wouldn't be advantageous to do this. But in the hours that we've had from yesterday to today, it's not a lot of time to really dig into all that. And the data I got about this, when I presented 60 towns that don't have zoning, that's from the Vermont Zoning Atlas. It doesn't talk about the towns that don't have bylaws either. I'm sure there are more of them, because you have to have both to do the thing. So unfortunately, I just don't, the bylaws are a harder number for me to dig into, but I just didn't have the time to do anything other than talk to a few representatives on both sides of the aisle to kind of get their take on, from those I knew who had towns that might not have zoning.
Just say that, my concerns that are still the same from when we considered this coming up from the Senate. For really all the same movements that were potentially, allowing some very substantial developments to happen in some very small communities with almost or very, very little or no oversight. And it just seems not to be a good policy choice to put that on communities, and they'd have no real say in what kind of whether this would happen or not. Just seems really, really problematic. And getting back to the point of this is exactly why we have Act 250, is to have some oversight of these kinds of bigger projects in places that could really use the help overseeing development in their communities.
May I ask the question? When you guys discussed this after it came from the Senate, I know you heard from Senator Benson testimony from, other than committee discussion, did you take any testimony on that particular section?
Well, Land Use Review Board came in and said they did not think it was a good idea for environmental justice reasons.
But did you do any more did you really dig? Because you're asking me questions about towns that may or may not. Did you guys talk to any other towns and see how it would impact them?
Yeah, so we had a single focus, if you remember, of this bill, which was addressing road rule in Tier 3. And that's where the bulk of our time, which was also really limited, was spent. So I think that actually is kind of one of our points, is that we haven't had time to take testimony on this. We haven't had time to look at maps or to ask even the 8 or 10 towns who might qualify, how would this play out for you? I think that could happen. It could happen, you could introduce a bill next year and have that happen.
And the only reason I asked is because on the floor after I presented, a member of this committee had made it sound like you guys actually did the work to dig into this topic when really you just had a committee discussion and heard from the presenter without taking further testimony on it other than land review to say they didn't like it. So I just was trying to understand if there was more work done than I understood. And it just sounds like it was what it was when I was here yesterday. So I think it was unfortunate that yesterday it was portrayed that this committee did more work to vet this piece.
You know, there were a lot of inaccuracies on the floor yesterday. So,
Just throwing that out there. So I really thank you for your time. And I just wanted, to say that I heard you and I tried to change it in a way that maybe would make it more amicable for you.
thank you. Representative Chapin.
I just want to mention that we did keep it in the bill through all of the testimony that we heard. So we did have 2 weeks of testimony from people like the League, Let's Build Homes, a number of folks we did not hear from individual municipalities. But I just wanted to say we did get testimony on the entire bill, including this language, and it was only called out by a couple of people who testified. So I just.
Okay. And
We
as
did-
you all know, we do our best to listen to as much
Yeah.
as we can, but we're in
Didn't
our
go
own worlds. Yeah.
Specific testimony on this paragraph from municipalities.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Representative Taglivia.
I just wanted to add a little bit to this. I talked to Senator Benson after he testified because there was considerable back and forth about oversight, and he made a list of additional permitting outside of Act 250, and I want to just go over some of them. Federal permit, there was Section 404 of the Clean Water Act that needed to be considered. Vermont A&R permits, air quality, source water, construction and operation for water system specific permit, wastewater systems and potable water supply permit, indirect discharge permit, underground storage tank permits.
These are all things they've applied for,
No, these are the things that would need to be
that could
applied for.
potentially be required.
Sure.
Sure.
I just wanted to make it clear that it's just with an exemption from an Act 250 permit. That doesn't mean you fire up the bulldozers that are waiting for the checkered flag and just go for it. There are still things, regulations, permitting,
Yeah.
rules that still need to be complied with.
Yes, there are. But there isn't any engagement with the community and those impacts.
It did sound like engagement with the community was important to you.
That's why I had the municipality piece in yesterday for that purpose. But then that got beat up because it's not going to be fair to developers, right? So I come back and I want to say, like, here we are saying that the community has no input. I try and provide something that gives community input, but then that's not fair for developers, right? Like, well, that's a tough one.
Is that not fair? I mean, why would community weigh much heavier than the developers?
I brought that in yesterday because there was a concern told to me by members of the committee that without zoning and bylaws, there's a concern that things can get squeaked through that the community wouldn't want. So by giving the municipality the last vote on it, you're bringing the municipality in to be able to make a decision for themselves and bring them into the conversation. But on the flip side, if developers like, well, tomorrow, Rep. Sakowicz had said tomorrow, or there's a new select board and they pull that, right? So catch 22. You're worried about one and the other. Well, which means more to you? Because that's the battle that anything's going to take up in the state. So it's tough because I presented something that I thought actually addressed your concerns to an extent yesterday. That was the main reason to me that it got beat up and turned down. I know there's other issues with it too, that you're things that you guys think there are other issues with as well. But then here I am saying, okay, then I'm going to take that off the table because I don't want that to be a limiter. And now the thing I put on the table to help communities have a voice is going to hurt developers, but then I take it away and now the community has no voice. I mean, I don't know what you're looking for.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, that it would hurt developers.
To what Rep. Cycles had said yesterday, or make them have pause.
Yeah, I can respond. Yes, you're right. I brought up the concern that if I was a developer, I would have a lot of uncertainty and that this provision wouldn't necessarily be helpful. And I think that's true. And I think, yes, so withdrawing that part of it did make sense. And I appreciate the effort. I really do. I guess I would bring this back to a conversation that we've had a bunch in this committee lately, which is that when we start to tinker with something, especially like Act 250 and these kinds of amendments, we run into problems that start to get complicated, and this isn't the right forum, or I guess the right moment really, to be taking on these kinds of issues, which do get complicated quickly. And I, for one, would be open to the idea of some other way for communities to weigh in on whether they want this kind of development or not. I think that makes a lot of sense, but I think figuring out how to do that in a way that makes sense is actually not easy to do. And we would have to really do quite a bit of work to make that happen. So I'm sympathetic to the kind of process that you'd like to see happen. I just feel like we would need a lot more time to actually come up with something which was robust and really did justice to the idea.
And actually, I'll add that I have said out loud a lot, even, anyway, there are these 105 or 9 towns that don't have both. We know that. I'm very intrigued by what that is. And I've asked people, like, could we get an intern to look into, like, call these 109 towns? Like, and we might get 109 different answers, but I'm pretty intrigued 50 years later. Why have they sort of chosen not to pursue zoning and subdivision bylaws? Because it's actually not that hard. And, majority of towns have done it. And I think that's a bigger question that this body could look into.
On that topic, I think a question might be thrown back, why do you want us to? Right, that'd be interesting too, why, for them to understand why the state feels that they should.
We're seeing across the state landowners appealing housing projects. They're telling us they don't want that. And we're making an assumption, many of us in this building, that that's what all these towns want. And I don't want to make that assumption for them. I feel like the 50 years they've had to do development review or stand up or have a higher threshold for triggering Act 250, that's saying something to us. And before we make changes, we should be sure we know what they're saying. That's how I feel. I feel oddly like I get accused of not defending rural Vermont, but I feel like defending this is defending rural Vermont.
I don't want you to take that. That's what I was saying. I was just trying to play that conversation with the communities, because that might be a question they ask back, right? That's all I
Yeah,
was doing.
sure.
I was trying to.
And I think that conversation will be really interesting when it happens. But it hasn't happened.
50 years.
Thank you. You have something to say?
No, are we need to start holding now or wait?
Oh, we need to do it now. Yeah.
Quick evening.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a comment. I represent several towns that do not have planning commissions and zoning. They depend upon 3 and or 5-member select boards to help answer the questions of a developer and of the townspeople where appropriate housing could be placed. Many of them don't even have community centers. Holland doesn't have a community center. Leamington doesn't have Morgan doesn't have a community center. And that's just 3 of the 12. I would say, don't diminish the power and the wisdom of your select boards that are appointed by the town meeting. They have governed for a long time and know the needs of the community. Certainly a 50-story, 50-unit building is not going to be placed in one of those towns. You'd be lucky if you got a 10-unit. That's all I'm saying. There's a practicality here.
All right, any other discussion? All those opposed to second Doberbridge amendment, raise your hand. 7. All those in favor? 2, 3. All right, off we go to the floor. Thank you all.
Like,